If the front of your hip hurts after a run, you've probably been told to stretch your hip flexor. But what if all of that stretching is part of the reason it keeps coming back? Because a hip flexor that feels tight is not necessarily too short. It may simply be struggling to control the forces of running. And no, you don't have to stop running to fix this. Here's where most runners get stuck. The front of the hip starts feeling tight, so you stretch it. Feels better for a few minutes. Then you go run and the exact same pain comes right back. So you stretch it again, maybe a little bit harder this time. Maybe you've taken 2 weeks off and it felt fine until your first run back. Maybe you foam rolled it. Maybe you got a printed exercise sheet that never really explained why. Maybe someone told you this is just what happens in your 40s. Stretching isn't automatically bad. It has a time and a place. But if this is a strength and load tolerance problem, tugging harder on an irritated area may be feeding it instead of fixing it. So in this video, we'll go over why this keeps happening, a self-check that tells you whether strength is part of the problem, 2 exercises to fix it, and what to do with your weekly mileage while you rebuild. I know this loop well. I dealt with it while running track in high school and college. Every flare-up, I treated it like a flexibility problem. Stretched it, felt looser, assumed I'd fixed it, then I'd run and it would come right back. Here's the part almost nobody says out loud. If you're a runner, you have almost certainly never trained your hip flexor. Your calves get worked every stride, your quads get worked on every hill, and if you lift, you're likely squatting, deadlifting, or lunging. Your hip flexor gets none of that. It's the muscle group asked to lift your leg thousands of times per run, and the one that's never had a strength base built underneath it. So it isn't short, it's just underbuilt. And an underbuilt muscle doesn't fail on day one. It fails when demand goes up. You add mileage, you add hills, you sign up for that race and start doing speed work. The demand climbs and the muscle never got the chance to climb with it. And so that's the loop. And you can't stretch your way out of it because stretching doesn't build anything. So let me show you where this shows up. So it shows up right here, just inside the front of the hip bone, sometimes drifting towards the crease of the groin. Not out on the side, not in the low back, right in front. You'll notice it driving the knee up, running uphill, picking up the pace, or at the end of your stride when the leg trails behind you. The main muscle in there is the iliopsoas, but several structures are packed into that small space. So hip flexor pain describes where you feel it, not exactly what's causing it. One note before you try any of this. Not every pain in the front of the hip is coming from the hip flexor. If the pain is sharp, if it's getting progressively worse, if it's changing how you walk, or if you feel catching or locking deep inside the joint, get it properly assessed instead of just guessing. That's a different problem and it deserves eyes on it. If none of that applies, here's the test. Sit near the edge of a chair, chest tall. Lift one knee towards your chest, put your hand on that thigh, and press down while the leg resists. Not trying to crush it, just enough to see how well you hold that position. Now compare sides. Does one feel noticeably weaker or shakier? Do you have to lean back just to keep the knee up? Does it reproduce that familiar pain in the front of the hip? This isn't a diagnosis, and a side-to-side difference doesn't prove the hip flexor is the only thing going on, but it is a useful clue. If the painful side can't create or control force, the issue may not be that the muscles need more length. They may need more capacity. Remember what that side felt like today, because this test is also going to be your progress marker. Retest every 2 weeks. Not every day, but every 2 weeks. If the work is doing something, that side should hold steadier and stop reproducing your symptoms as easily. That's how you know if this is working instead of just guessing. So tightness is a sensation, not a measurement. A muscle can feel tight because it's fatigued, irritated, guarding, or being asked to handle more force than it's prepared for. Stretching changes how far a muscle can move, but strengthening changes how well it controls and tolerates load. Those aren't the same thing, which is why pulling harder on an already irritated hip flexor can actually make it feel worse. You're tugging on sensitive tissue without improving its ability to handle what irritated it in the first place. Your hip flexor doesn't just lift your leg, it controls the leg as it comes back down. Think of lifting your leg like pressing the gas pedal. The hip flexor creates force to drive the knee forward, but it also needs brakes. It has to control the leg as the muscle lengthens again. That braking action is an eccentric contraction. You can be perfectly capable of lifting your knee and have no brakes on the way down. The leg drops too fast, the pelvis shifts, other muscles cover for it, then that repeats thousands of times per run. So we're not making the hip flexor stronger in the general sense, we're training the brakes. So for this first exercise, sit on the floor or near the edge of a sturdy bench with one leg straight out in front of you. Keep your chest tall and try not to lean back. Here's the important part. I do not want you to actually lift the leg. Use your hands, a strap, or the opposite leg to bring that working leg up. Once it's up, let go and lower it back down slowly. 3 to 5 seconds, knees straight, under control the entire way. That slow lowering is the exercise. You should feel the front of the hip working, and probably your thigh and core helping as well. What you should not feel is a sharp pinch deep inside the hip. If that happens, start lower, assist more on the way down, or stop this exercise. The most common mistake is trying to lift the leg without helping it on the way up. That's a completely different exercise, and most people end up leaning back or using momentum just to get the heel off the ground. So help it up and control it down nice and slow. Start with 2 sets of 5 per side, 5 days a week. Doesn't sound like much, but if you do it correctly, you'll find out just how fast the front of the hip actually starts to work. When you can get through all 10 reps on that painful side without the leg dropping, without heavy shaking, and without a flare-up the next morning, build up to 3 sets of 5. Then you've earned the standing version. For most people, that's about 2 to 3 weeks. This standing version puts you closer to the position you're actually in when you run. So face a wall, hands on it for support. The wall takes balance out of the equation so you can focus on the hip. Ribs stacked over your pelvis. Don't let the low back arch as the knee comes up. Start with no resistance. Drive the knee up, pause at the top, and lower it as slowly as you can. Again, the lowering is where I want your attention. Don't let your pelvis twist, don't let the back arch, and don't let your leg drop out from under you. 2 sets of 8 per side, 5 days a week, 3 to 5 seconds on every lowering phase. When you can do 3 sets of 8 with clean control, add a light band, a loaded backpack, or a light kettlebell over the foot. Just make sure it can't slide off mid-rep. Give this one 4 weeks before you decide whether it's working, and use your self-check as the scoreboard. Now the question you've probably been asking yourself, do you have to actually stop running? For most runners with this pattern, usually not. But that depends on what's actually driving it, which is why those red flags matter. If the pain is sharp, if it's getting worse, if it's changing how you walk, or if you're feeling a catching in the joint, that gets looked at before you make any decisions about mileage. Assuming that's not you, here's the general approach we take with runners in the clinic. Stopping completely tends not to be the answer because time off does not build capacity. The first real run back lands on the same underbuilt muscle. The idea instead is to lower the demand while you rebuild the base underneath it. A common starting point is cutting weekly mileage by roughly 20 to 30% for 2 to 3 weeks. Same number of run days, just shorter runs. Then rebuilding around 10% a week once the hip stops flaring after every session. The easy runs are what you're protecting. Hill repeats and track work are usually the first thing to come out because uphill running and faster paces both demand more from the exact muscle you're rebuilding. They come back, but only after the base does. So those are starting points, not rules. Your history, your current mileage, and whether you've got a race on the calendar all change the math. But the principle holds. You're not quitting anything. You're running at a level that the hip can handle while you raise the ceiling. And you don't need this to be completely pain-free. A little discomfort while you're reintroducing load can be acceptable. But there's a big difference between mild discomfort and sharp pain. If you feel a sharp pinch deep in the hip, if it worsens with every rep, or if the area is noticeably more irritated that evening or the next morning, you did too much. Shorten the range, drop the resistance, assist more, or do fewer reps. The goal isn't to overpower this in one workout. It's to give the hip a stress that it can tolerate, recover from, and adapt to. If the front of your hip still feels tight or guarded, here's one thing you can do about the sensation itself. Instead of aggressively stretching, apply gentle, static pressure with a lacrosse ball. So for this one, lie face down and place a ball near the front of the hip, up near the pelvic brim and off the abdomen. Shift your weight slowly until you find a tender spot. Don't roll back and forth, just hold tolerable pressure and breathe. Start with 60 to 90 seconds on 1 or 2 spots, once a day at most. Keep the pressure light and stop if you feel pulsing, numbness, tingling, abdominal discomfort, or anything sharp. There are also hip hook devices that give you more control over where the pressure goes. I'll link a few of our favorites in the description of this video. But keep it in perspective. A lacrosse ball isn't building anything. It calms the area down while the loading builds the capacity you're actually missing. So here's the whole video in one line. If the front of your hip keeps tightening after every run, the problem probably isn't that the muscle is too short. It's that nobody ever built it. And running is asking it to work thousands of times without a base underneath it. Stretching won't build that. Strength will. So give it 4 weeks. Keep running, but shorter for now. Retest yourself every 2 weeks. You're not falling apart and you're not too old for this. You're underprepared for the load, and that's fixable. But one honest caveat here. If you genuinely do have a mobility restriction in that hip, that's real and it's a different fix. We made a full video on hip mobility, and I'll link that right here. And if this has already forced you to cut mileage or stop running, one exercise usually isn't the whole answer. That's why we built our Return to Running program, where we look at your training history, how you move, your strength, your control, and what you currently tolerate. Then we build the plan around you. The link's below.